Welcome to another episode of Swarajya Live Conversations. It's a historic day today, and calling it historic would probably be an understatement. A wrong which occurred more than almost 500 years ago, it has been corrected today. The construction of the Ram temple has begun in Ayodhya. And over the next 1 hour, we'll be discussing a lot of issues pertaining to the temple construction, to the religion as a whole, across the subcontinent and beyond, and to the future of Hinduism. Today, I am pleased to have esteemed set of guests, beginning with Shri R Jagganathan, editorial director, Swarajya. Shri Anshu Tandon ji joins us from Lucknow. He's an author and researcher on Tulsidas. And we also have Shri Vikas Saraswat ji, who is an entrepreneur and a regular columnist for Swarajya. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Or Jai Shri Ram, as I should
Jai
say.
Shri Ram.
It's an auspicious...
Jai Siya Ram.
Jai Siya Ram. It's an auspicious day for Hindus, sir, across the world, not just in India, not just in the Hindi belt, anywhere, any corner of the world, any Hindu, they must be feeling very proud for what they saw today on their televisions, on the internet. How would you put the sentiment today, sir? How do you put in words? Jaggi, sir, if we can start with you.
See, I think when something that began a very long time ago and gathered fresh momentum about 30 years ago with VHP and other Parivar, Sangh Parivar people starting a movement to enthuse the masses to start fighting for what is their right, awakening the masses to what they lost, to rediscover lost heritage. So obviously there is a sense of huge fulfillment when you say, okay, after all this thing, it was worth the fight because we have now achieved our goal. But the journey actually has just begun. I don't think we can say that it is over because one temple cannot be, it's not about a temple. It's about realizing a civilizational heritage, resuming, taking pride in what is good in it, and also correcting and reforming what was not so right about it. That was what Ram was about. And Ram is a good starting point for this civilizational journey to both the past and the future, because he lived according to a set of good rules that he set for himself. He set higher standards for himself than the rest of people. And he showed us how rulers should rule, so many things. So we have to look at this in terms of what we are going to use this civilizational reawakening and how we're going to plan out our future. I think it's not about the past. The past is important. Injustices need to be recognized and corrected. But the Ram message is much larger than just a place of worship that has been recovered from marauding invaders.
Anshu, sir, if I ask you, it's also about the civilizational reawakening, as Jaggi sir put it very correctly. How would you look at it as today's event, as the in the perspective of civilizational reawakening?
Much of it has been covered by Jaggi, but I would start with it was a historic moment on an epochal occasion. And civilization is not something which is a status quo. It is not something, it is civilization is dynamic. It is a process and also a destination. It is like saying you are addressing me as Anshu Tandon. What is this Tandon identity? Till now, we were calling ourselves one of the oldest civilization. But the central feature of that civilization, Ram, was not in our midst, in the sense that that bimb, that symbol was missing. Today onwards, we will have it in the rightful place.
Vikasji, now I'll come to you. Very rightly put, the central feature of Hinduism, the one we call the oldest civilization of the world, it was missing. And I spoke to you earlier today. We were just discussing how joyful you were when the Bhoomi Pujan concluded. Where do you put the sentiment in these words? How do you see it?
In the civilizational context, no, if we see Ram Janmabhoomi, see, about 2000 years back, various civilizations were living in harmony. Of course, the kingdoms used to fight each other. Napoleon would come here, somebody else would go there. And there was a healthy exchange through trade, ideas, spirituality, and all that. It's only 2000 years back that with the advent of the Abrahamic religions, that there was a kind of conflict with old civilizational world, in which at one side were the polytheistic religions, and on the other side were these creedal religions. Those religions, the old civilizational religions, if we can call them, Greek people, Romans, Egyptians, India, they were basically kind of philosophical religions. What happened over a period of time with the Dark Age dominated by Christianity, and then uh, the might of Islam, the sword of Islam,
The darker age.
darker age, still darker age, very rightly said. This idea was subdued. Some flourishing civilizations like Persia, they went down within, I think, 20 or 25 years. Whole of the Persia was won by Islam. Now, this particular moment, and see the two aspects. There was a period wherein people became so exasperated with religion itself because it was creedal. It was not fulfilling their whole, whole sort of emotions or whole sort of dimensions. The whole process of seeking, that either you had to be total rationalist, which happened in Europe, or you had these two religions. So there was again one more period which culminated in the success of Marxism for a temporary period, which addressed the other side. That is the age of that is the seeking through rationality alone. India, by some luck of chance, or we can say that the valor and courage of our old ancient people, it survived that onslaught. And now we are in a position to address the humanity, or rather give them something which accommodates both the things in the human seeking, reason as well as spirituality. And this particular occasion, Ram temple, the Bhoomi Pujan at Ram temple, symbolizes that that civilization is not extinct. It is not merely for the Hindus or India alone. The significance of this Ram temple, it is there for whole of the humanity, that there is a confluence of reason and spirituality, and India offers that.
Right, Jaggi sir and Vikaji made this common point about the historic wrongs being corrected or being recognized. Even the Prime Minister made a subtle hint today about the temples or how they were attacked in the past. It wasn't a direct mention, but was a subtle hint on how invaders in the last 800 to 1000 years, they came to India, they conquered the lands, and they did all in their might to wipe out the identity of Hinduism, and they failed. The Ram, we know as it is, it survived. The Hindu civilization, it survived. So with today, what happened today, how do you look at the future civilizations looking at the past injustices against Hinduism? How do you look at that, sir?
See, there are two significant breaks from the past that have happened under this administration. One is you heard today, where the Prime Minister himself made a brief reference to the trials that Ram Lalla had to undergo for 500 years before he was given justice himself, right? The other thing is the CAA law, which came in December. For the first time, secular India took up a stand and say that, look, if you perpetrate atrocities on Hindus in the neighborhood, we have a right to speak up and do something about it. Before that, secularism meant that you only talk about minorities. You don't ever talk about the injustices that are meted out to the our own Indic dharmic peoples, right? So the two big breaks that have happened under this administration is that, look, India has to take a stand when some of its own dharmic people are affected in the neighborhood and in this country, and whether it is inside the country as in Kashmir or wherever, or in the neighborhood like Bangladesh or Afghanistan, we will not keep quiet. Earlier, secularism meant that if Hindus are targeted anywhere, we will keep quiet, which meant that the only country that could afford to speak for these people shut itself up. Now, today, actually, we have sent two messages that we will stand up for Hindu civilizational values, and if we are the ultimate guarantor of Hindu rights anywhere in the world. And Hinduism is not geographically restricted only to India. It is now a global thought process, and we will now challenge the Abrahamic way of thinking. So many things have been said in this in subtle forms, but they are there. Now we have to take those forward.
Anshu sir, I'll come to you. Jaggi sir spoke about CAA and the Ram Temple. That's a legal hurdle that was finished today in the sense. But I'll talk to you about in literary terms. There's a lot of literature about Hinduism that needs to come back into mainstream readings and writings, because our school kids, our college kids, they're not accustomed or even acquainted to all that literature. How do you see that as an important feature of the civilizational reawakening we're talking about?
Tushar, one of the main problem is that whenever we think, mostly we are thinking in terms, we are using English terms for our civilization. That is one of the biggest stumbling block. Religion in no way is a substitute for dharma. Number one. Let us start with mythology. Sorry, I will take a bit of time, 2 or 3 minutes. Let us start with mythology, religion, and philosophy. In Western context, these three fields came up at different space times. The mythology of West had no correlation to the religion of West, and the religion and mythology had no correlation to the philosophy that developed. Unlike in our place, where rituals, the religion comes from Ved.
Right.
And so does the philosophy, the Adhyatma, Upanishads, and the Puran are as much related. The characters that are there in our Ved or in Upanishad are getting their mentioned in the so-called mythology, that is the Puran. But my contention is Puran is in no way mythology. No, it isn't. There is a lot of history in it. So the biggest problem at the moment is that we have to stop thinking about our civilization. It is more than religion. As I said, religion is about rituals. But what we are seeing here is so encompassing umbrella that we are yet to get to the periphery of it.
Yes.
Where does it start? Where does it end? So for a start, we have to stop thinking with Western terms. No, we are not like it. Because when we say that Ram is mythology, no, Ram is not mythology. It is so far past in the history that a character has been reduced to just few symbols. Entire epochal events have been reduced to few lines. That is not his problem. That is our problem.
Right.
So,
Correct.
we can only make a start if we start using our civilizational lingo.
Right. Vikasji, would you add to that?
No, once Anshuji has said something, I don't think there is much left to be added. And it is always such a delight to hear him. So I think he has conveyed it comprehensively. This is not about religion alone. It is a civilizational awakening. And as for culture, so for civilization, religion plays an important role. It is an important component of your civilization. So this, though it is a temple, it will mean a, a lot for Hindus as a civilization or India as a civilization.
Right. At this point, I would also request our audiences to send in their questions, and I'll take the first question. It's from Raghunath. It's for all of you. He says, is it the right time to conduct this puja? So even after 492 years, people have this question. Is it the right time to conduct this puja? How would you answer that? Jaggi sir.
No, I'm not a puja expert, but my own common sense answer is there is no right time to do the right thing. All times are right time to do the right thing, but I'm sure a lot of pundits have been consulted on the timing, and I'm sure they did not make a mistake about it. So I would suspect that see, in our own our pundits have often differed about the right times for certain alignments of which is the right. Say Ganesh Chaturthi, sometimes according to one Panchang, it comes 1 month ahead or 1 month later. So there can be small differences between Pandits. But the thing is, if there are 2 right times, why a quarrel about it?
I think he had more to do with the pandemic.
Anshuji has something to say.
Anshuji, how would you say it? I think it had more to do with the pandemic situation we have with our Home Minister himself testing positive just a couple of days ago. So do you think the puja,
Tushar, as I said earlier, it has more because we have been acclimatized by the Western thought. Why do we need just one date or one particular time? Why do we need to be unanimous about that? Is Catholicism of thought.
Correct.
No, that is not needed. We munde matai bhinna. Why not? But if a section is decided upon a particular time and place, what is wrong with that? Why can't the other set, which is not agreeable to that, why can't we learn to live with that? That is what Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam is all about. As I said earlier, we have to change the way we think. We are attuned to the Western Catholicism.
Right.
We can differ and yet live as a family.
Correct. So one question I want to ask, I mean, everyone is talking that it was a wrong of 490, almost 500 years that has been corrected. And even before the Prime Minister made his speech, the CM, Yogi Adityanath, he spoke about how the entire process went through the correct legal means. It wasn't something that was forced upon. So where do you see the Hindu tolerance, the significance of tolerance of Hinduism as a civilization, as a religion, in the fulfillment of this dream today? Vikas, you could start with you, please.
No, regarding that aspect, no, why this date, why that date, why we don't have other priorities, why a temple alone? This is basically a psyche of a defeated person. A defeated person will endlessly keep questioning. He will have endless doubts. And I mean, he himself, no, he becomes the subject of flagellation. So, whether realistic, unrealistic, peripheral, I mean, he will go beyond the limits of periphery itself to keep questioning. I couldn't get the question part, what you were addressing to me, Tushar.
It has something to do with, you said, a lot of people, when the entire case was going on, they said we can build hospitals, we can build schools, the kids of Hindus study together. So where do you see the significance of Hindu tolerance as it is in the larger picture, in the fulfillment of this dream? How do you define Hindu tolerance from today?
So Hindu tolerance, no, how much more tolerance do you want? What 40, 50,000 demolished temples are on record. You go from Attak to Katak, Assam, there is not one temple. What are Hindus asking? They are asking for these 3 prime places, Ayodhya, Mathura and Kashi. These are 3 prime places for them, no? And you see the comparison. In the case of Ayodhya itself, you see the comparison. On one side is the birthplace of Ram. Ram, who pervades your entire thought process. I mean, I was just the other day, I was trying to think of names. How many? Thousands of names. I mean, he permeates every aspect of our living being. On one side, we have that Ram. And what is the significance of that mosque in comparison? There is no significance. Since 1935, it was no prayers were being held there.
Right.
So, I mean, how much more tolerance do you want? Actually, this was a perfect occasion for India to have its truth and reconciliation. Like in many other countries, we have had truth and reconciliation. Ayodhya offered that. Secular, all our English language media, they had a very good opportunity to assuage the Hindu feelings. But they have failed on some of the very basic things also. So Hindu tolerance has played. I mean, we have offered whatever we could offer. But for your existence, there are certain things which you have to stand up to. So
right.
It is that.
Anshu, sir, how would you put the tolerance of Hindus in this entire picture?
See, when, as Saraswat, as Vikas said, when Hindus are asked to be tolerant, it is funny because this whole concept of tolerance has come from Abrahamic religions, right? In your Karnataka itself, in Udupi, I believe there is a mandir dedicated to Harihar. right? And West, Harihar, Hari, Vishnu, and Shiv are being worshipped in one precinct together, right? And these Western historians have been telling us that there have been that the Vaishnavas and Shaiv have been fighting each other. No, there has been conflict of thought, but we have never literally fought each other. And what is so? How would you do? What do you expect of a Hindu when you ask him to be tolerant? Ram, when we say he's Maryada Purushottam, how would you define Maryada? I would very simply put it as that if a family, if a society, or a committee of nation wants to live peacefully together, then Ram is their idol. But if there is a conflict between neighbors, if there's a conflict within the society, Mahabharata is the text you should go to. So the moment we are talking of Ram, the very idea of tolerance is inbuilt. So first understand Ram and then talk to tolerance. Then talk tolerance to me.
Yeah.
Jaggi, I'll come to you at this point. Already a lot of English nationals, not just in India, even across the world, periodicals and newspapers and digital outlets, they'll be suddenly talking about the resurgence of Hindu nationalism. They'll have the pictures of the Prime Minister performing the Bhoomi Pujan, and the usual narrative will play out. How do you think we need to start countering this absurdity, I would say, because there's always this push by the Western media to make somehow the Hindus look intolerant, even the BJP government for that matter. How do we counter this? Because as you said in the beginning, it's just the beginning of the journey. It's not the end of the journey. So a lot of work remains. So these hurdles will come up. How do we tackle those?
See, I think every time we keep reacting to these jokers, we are actually putting ourselves in a position where we think they have some justification for what they say. And they are talking, by and large, they're talking nonsense. So to just take the tolerance issue, Karl Popper said a simple thing. Can the tolerant be tolerant with the intolerant?
Very nice.
That is, if you have to deal with somebody who is intolerant, you can't afford to be tolerant yourself. Because if you allow the intolerant guy to win, then that's the end of tolerance, right? And I'm not even going into Anshu's basic idea that Hindu society has never been about tolerance. It has been about acceptance. That is, we accept you as you are. We don't say we tolerate you because we actually think you're an idiot, but we will tolerate you because, otherwise, no. We have always accepted people. The word tolerance doesn't do. But I'm just using Popper's thing to say that tolerance is something, at one point, it is limited because you cannot be entirely tolerant with the intolerant. And we have two desert cults which are the epitome of intolerance, where they say my way or the highway, and you think that this is the right way to go. I mean, then what is these fellows? I think these people have a very simple thing. I mean, they say, oh, we brought equality, all human beings are created equal. But as I said yesterday, I think if all humans are equal, then why can't we accept a simpler corollary that all gods can also be equal? Why do you think that my God is superior to your God? Stop thinking that.
Right. The next question we have from Ashish Mishra, and it's a very important question. He says, how do we safeguard temples when the government changes? And to build upon this, the question asked by him, today the victory is as much as civilizational, as much as it is political also. We cannot just rule out the role of the government in power right now, or the efforts they have made towards temples. So how do we look at the temple? How do we look at safeguarding our temples? Not just the Ram Mandir, all the temples in Kashi, Mathura, down south, thousands and thousands of them. How do we look at safeguarding it tomorrow, let's say 24 or 29 or 34, if the government changes? Vikas, you will start with you, please.
Sure. 10 years back, even this talk was not there. Nobody spoke of free temples, actually. We had taken that the temples under HRCER there with the government. We took it for granted. At least there is talk now. We have two major judgments. One in Padmanabha Swami case, another one in Chidambaram. 2-3 other cases are also going. I mean, they are under the judicial process. Chilkur Balaji, I think Shani Singnapur, at least 2 are there. Uttarakhand Chardham temple, there is some sort of a judgment is already there. But the challenge, so there is a awareness about the issue, but the challenge lies that we can't take all these 30, 40, 50,000 temples one by one to the courts. It's not possible. And we see there are within the government, no, there are people who understand this, and even the mindset of the judiciary is changing. We had Justice Bobde commenting in I think Jagannath Puri case that for all the faults in temple management, ultimately a temple cannot rest with the government. A babu cannot control a temple. It has to be restored back to the society. So that is the kind of understanding within the judiciary also, and we people are also aware about it. I see a very positive I mean I am very positive about it, that we will soon have these temples out of the government control.
Anshu sir, how do you look at the management of the temple, say tomorrow, in the most absurd of the situation? We have a Rahul Gandhi government, for instance. How do you see the conduct of the government towards the temples there?
Tushar, again, a civilizational aspect. Arthashastra is the oldest treatise, not on economy, not just on economy, but on management, right? And it clearly mentions Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. As anger is one of the naras. Anger by itself is not wrong. Anger as a reaction is wrong. But anger as an emotion is a natural, is a healthy reaction. In the entire Ram story, the only time that Ram gets angry, jahan ki aaj the incident where which our Prime Minister pointed out, bhai bin hoy na preet. Right? So
did he say that? Did he say
yeah.
that? Oh,
yeah. Yeah, he very much mentioned bhai bin hoy na preet. The point is that what has happened is contracted out our individual and societal responsibilities. We vote once in 5 years and we believe we have done our duty to the democracy. We buy our Gita or Ramayana, we keep it on our shelves and we believe we have done our duty. No, we have to get involved. Whatever be the government, if we are involved as an individual in our civilization, in our society, be it any government, no one will ever be again able to touch it.
Right, sir. Jaggi sir, you've written so much about temple management, freeing our temples from state control on Swarajya. Almost so much information there is. How do you look at the management of temples when the government changes? Because there's still a lot of hurdles. For instance, the Places of Worship Act of 91. That needs to go before we can take any action on Kashi and Mathura, even through the legal means, for instance. So how do you see the management of the temples and the future role of this government for the temples in the remaining tenure they have, at least this tenure?
Yeah, see, I believe there needs to be an overarching law for temple governance which prescribes certain do's and don'ts. The actual thing can vary from depending on practices and local rules and regulations and requirements. So what you need to do is to ensure that certain basic governance rules are followed by all temples, but the actual running of it has to be done. If something goes wrong, and there can be a process to redress it, you cannot have the state government coming in and trying. The problem with government running temples is this, that it actually leaves only Hinduism crippled. Okay, Article 25 gives me the right to practice, preach, and propagate religion, right? Now, if you're sitting on 100,000 temples in just 5 southern states, where I can practice, maybe I can go and pray and then come back and put some money in the hundi and come back. But how am I able to propagate? Because your state, is the Tamil Nadu government going to ensure Ghar Wapsi for me? No, they're not going to do a thing. They're just going to collect the money and sell idols and make money on the side from corruption. But they are not going to actually help propagate my basic thought processes, right, in the dharmic way. So the point is, you have denied the so-called majority the right under guaranteed to everyone under Article 25. So this is so fundamental that I don't find, you're saying Right of religion exists for everybody, but the right of religion doesn't exist only for you, because you can't propagate, you can only practice. The government will run the temples, you go there, put your money and go away. That's it. How can that be?
Right. Okay, moving on to the next question. So there's, of course, today was a very auspicious day, but there's also an alternate reality that there's a cultural erosion when it comes to Hinduism. And Jaggi sir, you've written about this a lot, that it needs to be a missionary religion once more. It needs to go out to the world. And even the PM wanted to take the message of Hinduism to the world today when he spoke. So why do you think Hinduism needs to become a missionary religion once again? Jaggi sir, I'll come back to you again on this.
Yeah. So the thing, my view is very simple. The natural process, nature never accepts a steady state. Okay, a steady state implies stagnation. So the universe is either expanding or contracting. It is never at a steady state. This is the law of nature. Human beings evolve or regress. They don't stay at the same place. Staying in the same place means stagnation. Okay, so a religion that does not seek to propagate, it does not seek to send its message everywhere, essentially will become defensive and contract. Now, this was our situation over the last 100 years, where we were fighting a losing battle because we have always taken the defensive route. Remember, if you are a defender, you only have to lose once. Whereas if you're an offender, you can lose 100 times, but you only have to win once, right? So a defender has to have a 100% record in order to be a successful defender. But that's not the case if you are an attacker, right? So you need to look at these realities before you say. So you must have a certain degree of ability to convey your key thought processes, your key ideals. The propagation doesn't mean conversion, okay? It means that dharmic ideas need to be suffused all over the world. And for that, you need people who will talk about it and not say that, oh, we are terrible guys, we did sati, oh, we did this, we have got terrible things like caste, these are the only bad things we have done, we have not nothing good to offer to the world. If this is the attitude, you're going to be in trouble, right? You cannot have this kind of defensive attitudes going. You need to be a little missionary in terms of the best ideas that have come from this land have to reach everywhere.
Anshu, so your take on the same question, please.
See, I can't add much to what Jaggi has said because he has been comprehensive. But I would just say that, and as Jaggi rightly pointed out, and we have to learn about first. We as a nation, we as an Indian nation, need to go back to our scriptures. They are not just for reverence. They are to be studied. They are to be disseminated first to our coming generations, first to ourselves. We have to inform ourselves. Stop being reverential to Ved. Stop believing those pundits who tell us that you have to be reverential to Ved. Because what has happened is that people like Sheldon Pollock, and they are talking nonsense. They have no idea about what is there in the Ved. But we would not read Bhagwan Singh or Kuber Nath Rai or Hajari Prasad Dwivedi or people like Hiriyanna. So we need to rediscover through these people.
Anshu, sir, a question on that aspect we just got from Shivam Rakesh. He says, since you mentioned scriptures, why teaching Ramayana or Mahabharata or other scriptures in schools or in even universities raise the question of secularism in the country? So what you said, if we are to implement it, of course, the secularism debate will begin again. So how do we counter that also?
How is Ramayana? Because if you are saying, because as we say that Ram and Krishna are historical, so is it a historical document? Or if it is not a historical document, then it is mythology. If we can teach Greek mythology, then why can't we teach Indian mythology? And moreover, these are civilization. These are civilizational document. For instance, if you are living in US and if you are talking of Minnesota, and if something happened in Minnesota, won't you teach that? Kurukshetra, where Mahabharata happened, that happens to be in India. Ayodhya happens to be in India. So why can't we teach it as either history or, if not history, mythology? what is happening at the moment is that because of these communist historians, they are having it both ways. Neither will they allow to teach it as a history, nor will they allow to teach it as mythology.
Correct. So,
What it means is that they're running scared of what what these things contain. They're scared. That's why people who are scared will ban things. That is what they do.
correct.
Let me just point out one thing which I have been always mentioning. If you were to look at development, the idea development of Mayawati and Kashiram, they have been scared of Kabir. You would have never seen Mayawati or Kashiram mentioning Kabir. For that matter, though Kashiram originated from Punjab, but how strong is Kashiram or that movement in Punjab? Because they have Raidas, they have Kabir, because of Guru Granth Sahib. So this content, the content of what is there in our scripture, is the biggest bulwark. And as if we want to go offensive, as Jaggi rightly pointed out, we have to make use of this content.
Now, Vikasji, they both pointed out the right aspect of it, but there's one question I also have from Weber. He talks about, if we even look at the documents, we put them aside. He asks rather, that there's this entire nexus and lobbies working in public universities which are looking to attack the Hindu culture all the time. And young minds today, children who are 18, 19-year-old, probably in their early 20s, they have seen the civilizational reawakening today. But tomorrow when the universities reopen, they'll be again attacked by the same lobby, which leaves no stone unturned to attack Hinduism. How do these kids tackle that? The young minds, the people who are going to carry Hinduism forward in the coming decades.
I think this question is related to the proselytization idea. Basically, why are they attacking? These attackers are coming mainly from three backgrounds. Whether you call them Marx, whether you call them missionary, or whether you call them mullahs, these three ideologies are the ones who are attacking us or supplying ammunition for attacking us. And why is it happening? Because all these three are proselytizing. I call the missionary, I call the Marxists also a proselytizing kind of a religion. They are also a religion only. They too have a prophet, they too have one book. So the answer lies that we too have to become a proselytizing. Now, on the idea part, both Jaggi sir and Anshu sir were, spot on. But there is a solid problem to it. That problem is the caste conundrum. We have to address that. Say, you go to the Malkanas in Mewat, Mays or Maliks, no? Where do you accommodate them? Where do they come back? The one movement which had some kind of success in reconversions was the Arya Samaj, which was a casteless kind of a society. We have to think beyond that if we have to become a proselytizing religion. Whether it is ISKCON or some other movements in the West, they too are societies which are casteless societies. Here in India, either you have that kind of a movement and accommodate them, or do something about the caste. We keep on, many of us know, we immediately jump that no, dharmacharya should not be brought into it. I think this is a calling which the dharmacharyas have to take, because this is, it is the core. Now, you can't say that casteism is one social aspect of Hinduism. It has become deeply entrenched with Hinduism. You have to address that.
Right. Now, we've spoken so much about the cultural aspect of what happened today. And Jaggi sir, yesterday when we had another live session, you spoke about how temples need to be much, much more than mere places of worship. And today the Prime Minister also echoed that sentiment when he said that the temple complex would be far more than just a place of worship. So let me come to the economic aspect of it. And there's a question we have from a viewer. He's John. His name is John. He says, how will this impact the economic potential of Ayodhya as a whole and other Hindu temples in other parts of the world? So because if we have an economic success story with the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, how can we replicate that across India? Because a lot of temples of ours, they suffer when it comes to earning, the monthly earnings and everything. So could you define the economic potential and aspects for us?
Actually, the Chanakya Sutra is very clear in the first two phrases. One is Sukhasya Moolam Artha Dharma, Dharmasya Moolam Artha. That is, there can be no dharma without artha. So you actually, dharma is really creating an ecosystem which is self-financing, self-supporting, and uh, it both takes from the rich and it gives back to society, so that society as a whole stays together and is able to do that. Let's look at, say, even the Cholas. When they sent their expeditions to Southeast Asia, right? They did so because a lot of the temples were investors in those expeditions. Huh?
Right.
They contributed this thing, just like wealthy merchants gave money to the temples in order to keep the temples up. The temples contributed to the Chola expeditions that went to the Southeast Asia, right? Which is how Hindu culture spread in those areas. So the point is, this is a very virtuous cycle where you contribute to the temple contributes to commerce and community. All the three, content, commerce, community, that we talk about in the internet, actually that's what the temple ecosystem used to do. Today,
Right.
basically, if you see, all, even the new age gurus, whether you talk about Sri Ravi Shankar or Sadguru Jaggi Vasudev or Baba Ramdev or whatever, they are developing their own ecosystem, which includes an economic system. There is a
Right.
dharma being supported by artha. And if you don't think of both together, it will not work. Even Gandhiji said, for the poor man, food is God. Vivekananda Swami said the same thing, that all this spirituality makes no sense if you have a hungry stomach. So the economic well-being has to be very closely integrated with faith and spirituality and other things.
Anshu, sir, how would you look at the economic perspective when it comes to temples, or when it comes to making our temples great again, as many of them are faltering right now?
See, again, my starting point would be what Jaggi pointed out, because a seminal work has been done on this aspect by Dharampal and by many other historians, but I would single out Dharampal, that temples were the cultural centers, or rather civilizational centers, and in a way they were managing welfare state in a beautiful manner at a local level. In a way, you can look at it the way US manages, the local community manages their school. They manage their school because if the school is good, their property prices are high. So
Right.
if we were to hand over the temple to the society, there will be hiccups. But by and large, each local community would take pride, and because their local economy would hinge upon how well they can manage their temple.
Correct.
So it is interrelated, and possibly that is the way to manage a welfare state, because it has already been done. We have been there and done that.
Right. Vikas, you have a very interesting question from Abhishek. And since Anshu sir also spoke about people and societies coming forward to take care of the temples, is it time that Hindus elevate themselves as trusts when it comes to running the local temples? How do you see that model working out in the
Hindus, couldn't get you, Tushar. Hindus
should elevate themselves in the form of trust to run the temple, to build a local ecosystem?
I think even now, no, my colony temple does have a trust actually to take care of the affairs. So we do that. The problem is the larger, bigger temples where the government is under control. Say
Right.
like Vaishnav Devi. Not too many big temples as such in North India, and where the offerings are of a substantial kind of an amount. South India, of course, there are a lot of them, and then we have temples like Shirdi, Sai Baba. So where again there is government control, some kind of a government control is there. So the problem is the government control. Hindus do have their own trusts. You go to the smallest of temple, they will have a trust to manage the affairs.
Right. Now, the one question I have, it is from Abhishek Tripathi. Now we'll move on. He says, why there are special rules only for Hindus, be it marriages or be it temples? Why can't be uniform across for the rules be uniform across for every citizen? Jaggi sir, how do we address that going forward?
I think there are two ways to address it. That is, one thing is, in certain matters like property, inheritance, and various things, I think one can have common laws. certain cultural practices can be specific to communities. I mean, if you want to have a marriage or a ritual in a certain way, it's perfectly okay. But if the requirement that all marriages must be registered and that spouses have equal rights, these are all things that need to come into it. So there is a ritual and ceremonial aspect of it which can be entirely left to the community, but there is a legal aspect to it which needs to be common for all citizens. Otherwise what will happen is you will have, like, let's say there is a interfaith marriage, but if you have a nikah, by definition you're converted, which means you are no longer covered by the normal secular laws. It doesn't make sense. So you actually lose your rights the minute you got married in a different way, right? Whereas if you got married in a Hindu thing, there is no, you don't lose anything, right? Even though, let's say you marry somebody from another faith through a Hindu ritual, but there is no loss in terms of your rights after this. But in the reverse case, it is there because the Abrahamic religions take conversion very seriously, which means apostasy for them is the highest form of crime, which means that it's like Hotel California. Everybody is free to enter, but nobody can exit. Huh? You know, this is the reality. Huh? So I think we need common law so that we protect people, even
Right.
if they cross community barriers and marry across, but they need to have the same rights
Right.
and
Anshu,
inheritance and other things.
right. Anshu, sir, how would you answer this question?
No,
About
I
the-
can't. No, I can't add any more to it because he is so comprehensive. I can't add any more to it.
So I come to the last question for today's session. Again, it cannot be emphasized enough. It's a historic day. And the message of Hinduism, the tolerance, the civilizational reawakening, it's being taken to the world, not just India, to the world. Vikasji, how do you see the future from here? How do you see a sitting prime minister doing the Bhoomi Pujan, taking the message of Hinduism to the world for everyone across the globe to watch it? How do you see this playing out now in the future when it comes to various aspects?
I think if you have to put it very briefly in one line, we are shunning the apologetic nature which was associated with Indian establishment, as in the case of Pandit Nehru, who refused to go to Somnath, and we are seeing an assertion of our Hindu identity, which Modi ji did today.
Anshu sir.
Before I come to that, I will just briefly touch upon two things. As I said, civilizational. We are talking of divorce. And when we come to Hindustani, we say talaq. Can you think of any word in Sanskrit about which means divorce or talaq? No. Because our civilization doesn't know divorce.
Right.
Very nice.
That's a very interesting thought. Jaggi sir. Sorry, please continue.
Number two, when Vikas pointed out about integrating various jati, which is the biggest problem. We have never given due recognition to the work done by Gorakhnath. And if one were to read Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, had Gorakhnath been there, the onslaught of Islamic plunder that we faced would have been much more severe, because the numbers of communities that he brought into the Hindu main fold was humongous. Now, coming to your main question, what it means. Today, when we talk of Maryada Purushottam, when we talk of family as a unit, that family as a unit, I won't go into the various reasons of it, but that family as a unit was defined by Ram. We as a mammal are polygamous. The biggest, if you were to talk any sociologist, the reason why there is so much of inter-tribal fighting in Africa or anywhere is for the partner. Polygamy is the biggest cause. It was Ram who gave us the idea of family. So today we are rediscovering the essence of Indian civilization.
Jaggi sir.
Yeah, I mean, see, I think the takeout from today's thing is that I think we have given up there used to be something called the Stockholm Syndrome. That is, you start, you've been captive and defeated for so long that even when you're freed, you start singing the praises of your captors, right? Or your tormentors. Now, actually, Stockholm has given up the Stockholm Syndrome long ago. I would call it the Hindu syndrome, because we are the only guys who are still singing praises of all our invaders and tormentors and people who have done damage to us. Huh? I think hopefully this day marks the beginning of our emergence from this kind of self-defeating behavior, where we lose all sense of self-esteem, where we think that we are the pits and that everything else is progress and we are the guys who are the regressive people. I think we have emerging from that. We have a lot to tell the world, even though we have many things to reform inside our society. We have big things to convey to the world, and that message is a very powerful one. The thing of coexistence, acceptance, respect for another point of view, pluralism. It's not secularism. Secularism is bunkum. It was evolved in a very European context, and even they don't follow it. Huh?
Jaggi sir, just one question upon, since you mentioned Stockholm Syndrome, I'll just take one quick question. Nanda Kumar asked, there are a lot of Hindus today who are not taking pride in what was going on in Ayodhya even today. They were still suffering probably in their heads from the Stockholm Syndrome. Not just people, a lot of journalists we know about on Twitter also. They were showcasing their anger. How do you look at those people? Are they less of a Hindu? How do we look at them? Or the normal people who are not very joyous about this occasion today?
Actually, it's an evidence that when you have been demonized and demeaned for 1,000 years, I think what has happened is you internalize a lot of the criticism that you faced all through these centuries. So what happens is you are filled with a sense of self-loathing and self-hate. Now you have to grow out of it, and these people represent that self-loathing and self-hate. And it'll take time. It's if I were a shrink, I would put them on the couch and help them. But otherwise, they have to learn to start loving themselves a little more. I think even Western therapy would help them, because self-loathing is the last thing even Western therapy would recommend. I mean, it's self-defeating. It doesn't help. It is very, very negative. So I think these people need to grow up, and we hope that the message goes through fast. Sorry.
Tushar, one question, if I can ask Jaggi sir at this moment.
Sure.
Jaggi sir, since you have been long in journalism, how do you compare the present position? How many people are complaining today? How many of the self-loathing chaps in journal? I mean, as Tushar said something about the journalists, no? How many of those self-loathing people do you see today in comparison to 1991 or rather 1992 when that structure came down?
Yeah, actually, I think. See, before the 90s, there was a very broad secular consensus among all journalists. Nobody actually stepped out of those limited point of view, So that's why these fellows think that was some kind of golden period. Diversity started coming only after the 90s, and in fact, over the last 20 years. After 92, in fact, people started thinking. I myself belong to that secular cabal, which I used to mouth the same nonsense. But then I read Sitaram Goel and Ram Swarup and R.C. Majumdar and Nilakanta Shastri, and I moved away from leftist history. Then I realized there is much more to our heritage than what these leftist chaps told us about. So the self-loathing ended, and I realized there was a much more nuanced view we need to understand.
There is a distinct movement. There is a lot of progress.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, once some people start speaking out, others find the courage. Currently, what happens is people self-censor themselves.
Okay.
Because they think there is something called the Abilene paradox. That is, Abilene is a place which nobody wants to go, but suddenly somebody is bored and say, "Why don't we go to Abilene today?" Then say everybody thinks that everybody wants to go there, and nobody wants to go there, but everybody ends up there. So that is the situation with the Indian media, where you are trying to see whether what you say is politically correct or not. Once you have to accept that, you can't speak the truth as you see it, but you have to see what is an acceptable truth and say it. Then you will get only falsehood, because everybody assumes that collective falsehood is the truth.
Right. Thank you so much for that wonderful conclusion, Jaggi sir. Thank you so much, Vikas ji, Anshu sir, Jaggi sir. I'm afraid we couldn't take a lot of questions from our audience, but whatever questions we have, we'll address them in our future videos on Swarajya's standpoint, Swarajya Direct Line. And I request everyone to subscribe to our channel. And thank you so much, everyone, for this wonderful, wonderful discussion. Of course, it cannot be again emphasized enough what a historic, what an auspicious date is. And as Jaggi sir rightly said, the journey for Hinduism, for the civilizational reawakening, it has just begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshu, Vikas. Thank you very much.